The most expensive thing you will ever buy is the impression that you are rich. Walk through almost any office parking lot and you can spot them instantly. A leased German sedan in the best spot. Designer logos on the bag. A watch worth more than the car beside it. Everything about it whispers wealthy, and the bank account behind it tells a completely different story. So how did looking rich quietly become the fastest way to stay broke in America? Stay with me, because the math behind that question changes how you see every flashy purchase around you. How does someone earning good money end up with almost nothing to show for it? Let me introduce you to two people who work in the same building. They share the same job title and nearly the same paycheck, somewhere around $70,000 a year. The first one, we will call him Tariq, looks like he is winning. New trucks every few years, a closet that rotates with the seasons, weekend trips that show up beautifully on his feed. The second one, Felicia, is harder to read. Her car is a paid-off sedan with a small dent she never bothered to fix. Her clothes are plain, she brings lunch most days. If you had to bet on who was wealthier, almost everyone in that office would put their money on Tariq. They would be wrong, and not by a little. Tariq has roughly $400 in his checking account 3 days before payday and around $19,000 in debt that has nothing to do with a mortgage. Felicia has 11 months of expenses sitting in savings and a growing pile of investments that quietly compound while she sleeps. Same building, same income, opposite outcomes. The difference was never the salary. What separated them was that one spent years buying the appearance of wealth, and the other spent those same years buying the real thing. That gap has a name, even if nobody says it out loud. Think of it as the appearance tax. Every dollar that goes toward looking rich is a dollar that can never compound into actually being rich. It sounds simple, almost obvious, and yet it quietly bankrupts millions of people who would swear they are responsible with money. They do not gamble. There is no dramatic vice hiding in the background. They simply built a life where every dollar they earn is already spoken for by the image they are maintaining, and they cannot understand why the wealth never seems to arrive. To see why this trap is so effective, you have to go back more than a century to a sociologist named Thorstein Veblen. He noticed something uncomfortable about human beings. We do not just buy things because we need them. We buy things to send a message about who we are. He called it conspicuous consumption, and the idea is brutally simple. A $50 watch tells time exactly as well as a $50,000 watch. That extra money buys no extra accuracy. What it buys is a signal, a way to announce status to strangers who will forget you in seconds. Here is the detail that everyone misses about that signal. The people most desperate to send it are usually the people who can least afford it. Genuine wealth tends to go quiet. The loud spending, the visible logos, the constant upgrades, those are far more often the sound of someone reaching for a status they have not actually reached. And that reaching is expensive in a way that compounds against you for decades, long after anyone stopped being impressed. Let me make the appearance tax concrete, because abstractions never change behavior. Numbers do. Take something as ordinary as a car. Imagine Tariq finances a payment of $770 a month, which happens to be the record national average for a new vehicle in early 2026. Felicia drives a reliable used car with a payment closer to $350 than nothing at all once it is paid off. The gap between them is about $420 every month. It feels small. It feels like nothing more than the price of having nice things. Now watch what that small gap does over time. If Felicia invests that $420 difference every month at about 7% a year, a deliberately conservative, long-run assumption for a broad index fund, she ends up with well over $200,000 after 20 years. Give it 30 years and that single ordinary decision. Driving a normal car instead of an impressive one becomes more than $500,000. That is the actual price of the nicer car, not the sticker on the window. $500,000 in the future, gone, in exchange for looking slightly more successful in a parking lot. Think about that for a second, because it reframes the entire choice. The flashy car was never really competing with the cheaper car. It was competing with a paid-off house, an early retirement, the freedom to walk away from a job that drains you. The appearance tax does not feel like a tax because you never see the bill. The bill arrives quietly decades later in the form of options you no longer have. So why do smart, capable people keep paying it anyway? Because the system was never an accident. It was carefully engineered to target the exact part of your brain that craves belonging and status. Two researchers, Thomas Stanley and William Danko, spent years studying actual millionaires for their book, The Millionaire Next Door, and they found something that contradicts everything advertising teaches us. The typical millionaire does not look like a millionaire. They live in modest homes, drive unremarkable cars, and spend far less than they easily could. Meanwhile, a huge share of the people who do look wealthy are running on borrowed money and razor-thin margins. Stanley and Danko described how young people get programmed early with a single toxic belief that if you have money, you must show it. And if you do not show it, you must not have it. That belief is everywhere. It lives on every screen, inside every advertisement, baked into every influencer post, promising that the right purchase will finally transform who you are. And in 2026, that programming has a brand new delivery system that previous generations never had to survive. That system is the endless scroll. Researchers now have a name for what it does to your sense of money. They call it money dysmorphia, a distorted view of your own finances driven by constant comparison to everyone else's highlights. A study conducted for Intuit Credit Karma found that more than 4 in 10 of both Gen Z and millennials report experiencing it. Nearly half admit they are obsessed with the idea of being rich. And the truly damaging part is this. Around 95% of the people with money dysmorphia say it is actively hurting their finances, pushing them to overspend, take on debt, and stop saving entirely because saving feels pointless next to the lives they scroll past every night. Sit with what is actually happening there. Nobody posts their budget spreadsheet. The quiet Saturday spent at home to save money never makes it onto the feed, and the anxiety behind the leased car stays carefully off camera. What you see instead is a curated reel of everyone's single best moment, stitched together into a feeling that you are falling behind. You end up comparing your entire messy reality to 1,000 people's edited highlights. And then you spend real money trying to close a gap that was never real in the first place. What makes the comparison so cruel is that the numbers behind it are mostly fiction. The median savings balance for an American household sits somewhere around $5,000, and many of the people who feel hopelessly behind actually have more than $10,000 saved while still feeling broke. Meanwhile, the lives they are envying are frequently propped up by debt the camera never shows. You are losing a race against people who are also losing, except they happen to be losing more expensively. The person posting the rooftop dinner may be one slow month away from a missed payment, and you would never know it from the photo. There is even a behavior researchers have started tracking that captures the whole trap, a kind of doom spending, where people overwhelmed by feeling behind start spending more to soothe the very anxiety the spending created. The worse you feel about money, the more you buy to feel better, and the more you buy, the worse the money gets. It is a loop designed to keep you running in place, and the algorithm feeding you those highlight reels has every incentive to keep that loop spinning. This is the part that even the experts call a quiet epidemic. A recent Edward Jones report estimated that financial stress is gnawing at more than 200 million Americans. many of whom look completely stable on paper. Separate data from Bank of America has shown that even households earning more than $150,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. The strain shows up even when the numbers look fine, because the appearance tax does not care how much you make. It scales with your income. The more you earn, the more lifestyle you feel pressured to display. And the squeeze stays exactly as tight as it was before the raise. There is a name for that engine too. Researchers describe it as the better than instinct. A better car than the neighbor, a better watch than the colleague, a better vacation than the sibling. Each purchase is a small attempt to win a comparison that nobody is actually keeping score of except you. The dinner party becomes a stage. Everyone performs success, nobody admits struggle, and you walk away feeling poorer about a situation that might genuinely be more solvable than theirs. The comparison is a thief, and what it steals is not just your peace. It steals the dollars you hand over trying to keep up. It gets stranger at the very top, too. A Wells Fargo study focused on affluent millennials. People earning at least $250,000 a year found that well over half felt it was important to look or appear financially successful to others. More than 40% of them relied on credit cards or loans to fund that appearance. Read that again slowly. People making serious money were borrowing in order to look like they were making serious money. The image had quietly become more important than the reality it was supposed to represent. This is where the story stops being about psychology and starts being about machinery, because the single most effective tool for staying broke while looking rich is sitting in nearly every driveway in America. The car. We touched on the average payment, but the full reality is worse than one number suggests. In early 2026, the average amount borrowed for a new vehicle climbed to almost $44,000, an all-time high. The average loan now stretches close to 70 months, which is nearly 6 years of payments on something that loses value the entire time you own it. And the $1,000 club keeps growing. Nearly 1 in 5 new car loans now carries a monthly payment above $1,000. Here is the part that still does not make sense to most observers. Almost 3/4 of those $1,000 payments are not for exotic luxury cars at all. They are for ordinary pickup trucks, the kind you see on every block, financed straight to the edge of what a budget can survive. The status symbol does not have to be a supercar. It just has to be bigger and newer than whatever your neighbor pulled into the driveway last week. The depreciation underneath all of it is the part nobody factors in. A new car can lose up to 60% of its value over the first several years, according to Kelley Blue Book. You are not just paying for the car, you are paying to watch it melt. And the costs do not stop at the loan. Full coverage insurance now averages somewhere around $225 a month, climbing right alongside the payment while delinquencies quietly rise in the background. The share of auto loans more than 90 days past due has been creeping up, which tells you a lot of those impressive vehicles are being held together by hope. Leasing deserves its own moment, because it has become so normal that almost nobody recognizes it as a trap anymore. Meet Damon. Damon has leased a luxury sedan continuously for the better part of 20 years, always with a payment he can technically afford, always with a fresh badge in the driveway. When you lease, you pay for the steepest, most expensive years of a car's life, the years when it loses the most value, and then you hand it back and own nothing. The average new lease payment in early 2026 runs about $619 a month. Sign one lease after another for 20 years, the way Damon did, and you will have paid out close to $150,000 with not a single dollar of ownership to show for it. Lease, return, repeat, forever. That same $619 invested instead would have grown past $300,000 over those 2 decades. The leased badge on the hood quietly cost Damon $1/3 in wealth he will never see. Now compare all of that to what people with real money actually do. Dave Ramsey's research on millionaire behavior found that the most common car brands they drive start with Toyota at the very top, followed by Honda and Ford. The flashy European badges barely register on the list. Jeff Bezos drove a Honda Accord for years after he was already wealthy enough to buy the company that built it. Warren Buffett, one of the richest people who has ever lived, still lives in the same modest house he bought back in 1958 for around $31,000. None of these people are short on options. They simply decided long ago that looking wealthy was not worth the cost of actually being wealthy. The genuinely rich tend to buy their flashy items after the wealth is already built, almost as an afterthought. The people pretending to be rich buy the status symbol first and hope the wealth shows up later to justify it. It almost never does, because every dollar locked into that performance is a dollar that cannot go to work building anything underneath it. Every visible upgrade also drags a cascade of hidden costs behind it, and almost nobody adds them up before they buy. A bigger house needs more furniture, higher utilities, more square footage to heat and cool and fill. A truck needs the premium insurance, the accessories, the fuel. The watch needs the lifestyle that makes the watch make sense. Researchers call this the lifestyle multiplier, and it means a single status purchase rarely costs what the price tag claims. It quietly multiplies into an entire ecosystem of spending that has to be fed every month for years. This is also why a bigger paycheck so rarely fixes anything. Each raise quietly becomes the down payment on a slightly more expensive version of the same performance. Income goes up, lifestyle inflates to match, and the gap between earning and keeping stays exactly where it was. People pulling in $300,000 a year report feeling just as squeezed as people earning $80,000 because their expectations expanded in perfect lockstep with their income. The treadmill simply got faster while the view stayed the same. Housing is where this gets most expensive and most invisible. There is enormous pressure to rent the impressive apartment in the building with the rooftop and the lobby that photographs beautifully, even when it swallows 30 or 40% of a paycheck. A great address is the purest status purchase there is, because everyone sees it and it builds you absolutely nothing. You are renting the appearance of having arrived month after month with zero equity at the end and a savings rate crushed flat to cover it. The flex is real. The wealth it destroys is just as real, and it never shows up in a single photo of the skyline. Even the things people assume hold their value usually do not. The designer bag, the limited sneakers, the status pieces bought to broadcast taste, most of them lose the majority of their worth the moment they leave the store, the same way a car does. A handful of rare items appreciate. The overwhelming rest are simply expensive depreciation you can wear. An entire industry now exists to rent the look outright, designer by the week, so the signal can be sent without even the pretense of ownership. The appearance has been fully separated from the wealth, which is precisely how you end up with people who look like everything and own nothing. Stack enough of these on top of each other, and you get someone like Keaton. A good income for 15 years, always the newest phone, the leased car, the address, the wardrobe, the front row seat at every milestone. By 40, he had everything that looks like success and almost none of the thing itself. No emergency fund, a tangle of payments, and a small jolt of panic every time a bill landed early. He had not made one catastrophic mistake. He had made 1,000 small reasonable ones, each defensible on its own, that quietly added up to a decade of building an image instead of a life. That is the brutal arithmetic of the entire game. Someone performing wealth often pours 20 to 30% of their income into looking the part. Someone who is actually wealthy spends 2 to 5% on those same categories. That difference is not a rounding error. Over a career, it is the whole fortune. The gap between arriving at 50 with options and arriving at 50 with a closet full of receipts. Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe if any of this is landing, because this channel breaks down the real numbers behind everyday money decisions every single week. And the next few minutes are where the quiet leaks turn into the biggest ones of all. Step back and look at the wider landscape for a moment, because the car is only the loudest version of a much larger problem. The appearance tax does not only show up in big purchases, it hides inside dozens of small ones that feel harmless on their own. And in 2026 there is a brand new machine built specifically to make those small ones invisible. That machine is buy now, pay later. On the surface, it looks like convenience, a friendly little option at checkout to split a purchase into 4 easy installments. Underneath, it has become one of the most effective ways ever invented to spend money you do not have on things designed to make you look like you do. The numbers tell the story. A report from LendingTree found that nearly half of buy now pay later users said they had paid late on one of these loans in the past year, a figure that has climbed for 3 straight years. Around 63% of users have juggled more than one of these loans at once, and a quarter have stacked 3 or more at the same time, often across competing apps that cannot even see each other's balances. It went somewhere genuinely absurd in the last year. Klarna, one of the largest of these services, partnered with DoorDash so that people could finance their food delivery and pay it off over time. Let that settle for a second. You can now go into installment debt for a burrito. People online started joking about racking up thousands of dollars in DoorDash debt, and the jokes were not really jokes. One young woman admitted that her daily delivery habit was quietly costing her around $9,000 a year. That is the part nobody ever stops to calculate. So let me calculate it for you. That $9,000 a year habit works out to about $750 a month, invested at 7% over 30 years. That same money would have grown to nearly $900,000. A lifetime of feeling slightly more convenient and slightly more put together, traded for almost $1 million in retirement. That is the kind of number that makes accountants cry, and it is hiding inside a habit most people would never even think to question. The reason these small leaks are so dangerous is that they bypass the pain you are supposed to feel when you spend. Every part of the buy now, pay later design is built to reduce that friction to zero, to make the decision to take on debt happen in a fraction of a second, often before you even reach the final checkout screen. The installment price gets shown in big, bold letters while the real total hides in the background. You feel like you are spending $35 instead of the full amount, and that feeling is the whole product. Worse, much of this debt is invisible to traditional credit models, which is why people have started calling it phantom debt. It does not show up cleanly anywhere, right up until the moment it quietly crushes a budget. Then there is the upgrade habit, the one that looks responsible because each individual purchase seems reasonable. The phone that works perfectly gets replaced because a newer one exists. Say you spend an extra $50 a month chasing the latest model when your current one was completely fine. Invested over 30 years, that one small upgrade reflex would have become roughly $60,000. Multiply that pattern across every category where upgrade culture operates, the constant trading up of things that already work, and you start to understand how someone can earn a good living for decades and still arrive at retirement with almost nothing. Credit cards run on the same psychology, just with a far higher cost when you slip. The average credit card now charges somewhere around 21.5% for people carrying a balance near historic highs. The average balance among people who carry debt sits at almost $8,000. Run the simple math on that. Carrying that balance for a year at that rate costs roughly $1,700 in pure interest. Money that buys you absolutely nothing. Money that simply evaporates to maintain the appearance of a lifestyle that could not be paid for in cash. There is a tell that gives the whole game away, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The person performing wealth almost always talks about money they are about to make rather than money they already have. A big deal closing next month. An investment that is going to change everything once it finally pays off. Always future tense, always just over the horizon, because the present does not match the image. There is a cousin to that tell, the way some people brag about revenue instead of profit, announcing that their business did $500,000 while quietly leaving out that they took home a tiny fraction of it. The exaggeration has nothing to do with confidence. It is the sound of a gap being papered over in real time. Now here is the reframe that changes everything, the one I promised you at the very start. Once you understand the appearance tax, the people who looked rich start to look broke, and the people who looked ordinary start to look quietly free. Stealth wealth is no longer a quirky trend. It has become the actual behavior of people with money. A 2025 Empower study found that a large majority of everyday millionaires still budget, still hunt for deals, and still avoid extravagant lifestyles even after crossing into seven figures. The habits that built the wealth turn out to be the same habits that protect it. Felicia, our quiet coworker from the beginning, understood something Tariq never did. She had defined what enough looked like before her income ever arrived. Long before the raises, she decided what kind of car met her needs, what kind of home was sufficient, what level of comfort actually made her happy. Then she earned toward that target instead of letting the target slide higher every time her paycheck grew. That single discipline, defining enough in advance, is what separates the people who always have money from the people who never do, no matter how much either of them makes. Consider Sandra, who did the same thing on purpose. She set a number, a real figure that meant freedom to her, and she pointed every spare dollar at it for years while her coworkers upgraded around her. The day she crossed that number, the performance everyone else was still running suddenly looked exhausting from the outside because she no longer had to play. She could say no to a job. She could absorb an emergency without flinching. That is what the quiet path actually buys, and it never once needed an audience. Watch how violently that discipline pays off. Suppose two people each earn that same $70,000 a year. One spends around 28% of their income on looking the part, the cars and clothes and constant upgrades. The other keeps it closer to 4% and invests the difference. That gap comes out to roughly $1,400 a month. Invested at 7% over 30 years, the careful one ends up with more than $1.7 million that the performer simply does not have. They started with the same income, in the same town, from the same line. One finishes with a closet full of depreciating things, and the other finishes with the freedom to do whatever they want for the rest of their life. Real wealth is not what you show. It is what you keep, and what it buys you is the one thing status can never deliver, which is the ability to stop performing entirely. The person with savings can walk away from a toxic boss. The one with investments can survive a layoff without panic. Anyone who looks rich but owns nothing has to keep the performance running, because the moment the income stops, the whole illusion collapses overnight. That quiet security is the real flex, and almost nobody posts it because it does not photograph well. So how do you actually step off this treadmill? especially if you just recognized your own habits in everything I described. The good news is that the way out is far simpler than the trap. It starts with a single honest question before any purchase, which is whether you are buying the thing for yourself or buying it to be seen. That one question kills an enormous amount of wasteful spending on its own because so much of the appearance tax only exists for an audience that is not even watching. It also helps to quietly trim the inputs feeding the comparison in the first place. Mute the accounts that consistently leave you feeling behind, because no budget survives a feed engineered to make you feel poor. Protecting your attention turns out to be one of the most underrated money moves there is. The second move is to make saving automatic and spending difficult instead of the other way around. Too many people leave saving as the thing they will do with whatever happens to be left over, and somehow there is never anything left over. Flip the order. Send money out the moment your paycheck lands, before your brain ever logs it as spendable. What you do not see, you do not miss, and what you automate, you no longer have to win an argument with yourself about every single month. Here is something that matters more than people realize at this stage. Your trajectory matters far more than your current position. Someone at 40 with modest savings but a high saving rate will overtake someone with a big balance and a tiny saving rate within a single decade. Velocity beats position. If you feel behind right now, you are not actually behind. You are standing at a turning point, and the only thing that decides which way it breaks is what you choose to do next. The very first concrete step is almost embarrassingly easy, and most people skip it for years. Take whatever cash you are saving and move it somewhere that actually pays you. The big traditional banks, the household names everyone trusts, often pay around 1/100th of 1% on savings. At that rate, $1,000 sitting there for a full year earns you about 10 cents. A solid high-yield savings account in 2026 pays somewhere around 4%, which is more than 10 times the national average and hundreds of times what the giant banks offer. Same money, same federal insurance, wildly different result, purely for moving it. That alone is a sign you have started thinking like the quiet wealthy instead of the loud broke. But a savings account is only the holding pen. It keeps your emergency money safe and reachable, and it should never be where you try to build real long-term wealth, because over decades, inflation slowly eats away at it. Once your foundation is steady, the real work is putting money into things that grow faster than your savings rate ever could. And that is exactly where most people freeze, because investing feels complicated, intimidating, and risky. Like a casino they were never handed the rules to. It does not have to feel that way, and you do not have to start with the scary parts. The calmest place to begin a retirement journey is also the most overlooked. It is the corner of investing built specifically for safety and predictability. The part that lets you understand how your money can earn a real, dependable return before you ever take on a single bit of stock market volatility. Right now, for the first time in a long while, that corner is actually paying people well, with safe government-backed options yielding around 4.5%. Understanding that piece first is what gives you both the confidence and the solid base to build everything else on top of, if you want the genuine starting point. The foundation that makes the rest of retirement planning finally come together, I put together a full breakdown of exactly how that world works, and it is the natural next thing to watch right after this. Now think back to that parking lot from the very beginning. The leased sedan in the best spot, the logos, the watch worth more than the car beside it. You see it differently now. What you are actually looking at is the appearance tax being paid in real time, decade after decade, by someone trading a future they cannot see for a status nobody will remember. And somewhere across the lot sits the plain paid-off sedan with the little dent. owned by the person who is quietly, boringly, becoming genuinely free. The brutal truth about looking rich is that it works exactly as advertised. It makes you look rich. It just makes absolutely sure you never become it.